You're listening to the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by Referral Mortgages and Blue Panda Realty, with your hosts, Paul Stevenson, David Warren, and Greg Campbell. Let's see what's going on in the world of real estate in our nation's capital.
Good morning.
Yes.
Yes.
Paul Stevenson, what's up?
We're a man down. This is the Ottawa Real Estate Podcast. Every week, we get together here to talk about mortgages, real estate, whatever else we want to talk about. I'm Paul Stevenson. I am one of the owners of Referral Mortgages here in Ottawa, and I'm joined, as always, by my esteemed colleague, Greg Campbell. He is one of the partners over at Blue Panda. We are not joined by David Warren today, unfortunately, but we do have two special guests, so we'll intro shortly. So just a reminder, you can watch or listen to the podcast on YouTube and on the podcast service of your choice, so Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, wherever you listen. We post it every Tuesday, 10 a.m. And if you're interested, you can also listen to the show live, as you're doing right now, Friday mornings, 10 a.m., usually on Facebook. And we also just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, North Brew Coffee. North Brew is a locally owned and operated coffee business, and it's an amazing company. Amazing company. You can get 20% off all your coffee orders. Just use the promo code podcast, northbrew.ca. Greg, how's the week going?
What's
going on?
Paul? The week's going great. It's lots of changes in the real estate market, and happy changes. I think I won a conditional offer. I won in multiples the other day at only 15,000 over list price with conditions.
Wow!
And we did
conditions.
Now we just removed the conditions, and the deal is firm.
The C word.
And and I'm going to see two other properties today with buyers that are, and the homes are not holding offers. So I think it's safe to say the change. I mean, we've been talking about it for weeks, but in the last 5 days, it's changed quite drastically, and I think it's going to change even more in the next week.
That's great.
A lot of buyers are taking some time off. I think a little bit of fatigue. Summer's in effect. We're getting back to like a regular, what would be considered a regular summer market as of pre 2 years ago.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way too. I feel like the buyers I've been working with that were pre-approved and kind of sitting on the sidelines, like you said, they had a bit of that kind of buyer fatigue. They've definitely jumped back into the fray now and are excited to be out shopping. And I know you've been talking about this for a month or so, but there's definitely been a large amount of listings that have now come on to the market.
Yeah,
which just helps to balance everything out. CMHC also this week announced that they're reverting back to their old guidelines. Remember, they made a change last year and kind of tightened things up and thought that they would affect the market. But unfortunately, they only affected their own market share. So they've reverted back to their old policies as far as guidelines go. So minimum beacon score, debt ratios, things like that are all back in line with the other insurers in Canada. So that's good. It'll give people, it'll make it a little easier for them to qualify. The last year we've seen a lot of bit of a roller coaster for people with regards to employment and just life in general. So it's good to see everything kind of stabilizing and getting a bit back to normal.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because I just a couple buyers reached out to me that I haven't spoken to in about, 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks. We kept in touch a bit, and then I messaged them today. I'm like, listen, guys, I'm like, just have a look at your feed and see what's going on. And they're like,
check the feed.
Like, oh my God, they're not holding any offers. This is great. So now we're going shopping. I hope it's only me going shopping with my buyers. I don't want to be in any competition. So if you're a realtor, don't let your buyers know what's up. So they're all mine.
So cottages, we're talking about it being summer, it being kind of, camping, cottage season. So we figured we should really tailor a show towards cottages, how to buy a cottage, how to finance it, where to find them, what the deal is. We had a lot of questions actually on our last episode. We were talking about the market stabilizing, about cottages and just what the outlook looks like. So we thought we'd bring in a couple cottage experts, and maybe Greg, you can make these great gentlemen an intro.
I'll intro these guys because I know these guys. They're pretty good guys. They're part owners at Remax Boardwalk, along with a couple other beauties, Mark Papineau and Jason Spartalis. And let's introduce Pete Bastedo and Trevor Clark. Let's go.
Thanks for having us here, guys. Thanks, boys.
Yeah.
I love when I get called an expert. This is so great.
It means you know what you're doing.
I know you're talking about the market, and like we're seeing the change over here too. But then we look at the cottage side of things. It's like waterfront is still just on this steady incline. It's weird to see. But yeah, Pete and I have been doing the waterfront thing. We've been making that our niche for the last 10 years. Pete's got a deep history out on the lake.
Yeah, I've been over at Big Rideau, so the Rideau Lakes area. I grew up there. My family's fourth generation. So I sort of just fell into the whole cottage market niche. Was working in the city for a while and thought, I saw that sector when I started was really underserviced. So I thought, let me bring some of the stuff we're doing as city agents to the water. And it just sort of started to take off that way. I had a whole bunch of connections up there and sort of fell into it, which ended up being a very happy surprise.
Now, do you guys think, just kind of off the top of my head here, do you think that, I kind of already know the answer, but I'll throw it at you anyways. Do you think that the pandemic and people having to work from home and being able to work remotely, has that prompted more people to kind of push themselves outside the city to those kind of rural properties and think of that cottage as potentially a forever home as opposed to just a vacation rental?
Yeah, I think a lot of people that had that idea in their mind for a while anyways, it just sort of moved their timeline up. We've seen that a lot where people are like, you know what, like, who knows what's going to happen? Let's sell our city home. Prices are sky high anyways. And we'll move our plan up since we can do our last couple years of work remotely from the cottage. And then we've got our retirement home set. I think that's been a big push as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know, beginning of last year, we saw prices in, Carlton Place and kind of the outskirts, Russell, Limoges, like all those kind of just outside the city. We saw those prices starting to really climb. Dunrobin, like all these kind of little, I shouldn't say little, but growing communities. And I know that places like even Perth and, Crosby and all these kind of little like smaller, what were smaller towns are really starting to grow. And I think a lot of that is because of the vacation kind of cottage rental or cottage. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like the recreational market.
Thank you. Market. That's the word. Market. Great. So we had one of the questions we had last week, and I'll put this towards you guys. It was from the Mango Man on YouTube. Great name. It says, "Good work, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on individual neighborhoods across Ottawa. Are there any areas cooling faster than others? I'd read about cottage prices rising rapidly earlier this year as well. Any predictions on which direction those might trend the rest of 2021? So where do you guys see the cottage market? I know you're saying it's still kind of a steady incline, but where do you see that kind of finishing for the remainder of the year?"
Mango Man, great question. So the cottage market in some areas, like even Constance Bay, right? You're talking about these little areas. There were places that didn't sell last year, listed like around that 600,000 mark on the market, didn't really sell, get relisted and selling for over 1.1 million. So we've seen like close to a 50% increase in some of those markets. And a lot of that's to touch on Pete's point, like people who we've been working with who maybe want to buy that dream waterfront retirement home in 5 to 10 years are all of a sudden pulling the trigger on it right away. And they're like, well, I can work from home now. Why am I doing it with the view out my little tiny backyard when I can do it looking at the water?
And we're getting people coming from Toronto as well. Toronto, people looking at the Kawarthas, everybody that's got their search criteria set up for waterfront, they're not just looking in one area anymore. Like they're like, well, we'll go to the county or we'll go to Kawarthas or go to Rideau Lakes or whatever it might be. So we're getting people coming from all over the place. Just basically, I've had people drive down from the west end of Toronto that morning to come and see a property that just got listed. Because there's just no inventory out there for anybody right now still. Yeah.
So I think the drive is going to be there.
And what parts are you guys covering in particular? Obviously, you have a pretty good referral network, I imagine, that you're working with as well.
We sort of do, Charlotte Lake is about as far northwest as we go. Rideau Lakes is where I feel the most comfortable. And when like selling waterfront is like, you've got to really know the shorelines and the waterfront where you're selling, especially if it's like in the winter or the fall or the spring, knowing what the water levels are going to do and what that waterfront's going to look like mid-July if you're trying to sell something in May or in September is huge, and trying to advise people on the proper way to go. Because there might be a gem out there that's, right now the water looks really low, but you don't know that the water's already dropped 4 feet and in the middle of July it's going to be perfect. Mm-hmm. That kind of stuff is really paramount. So when I get outside of my comfort zone, I'll just refer it out to agents that specialize in those areas.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
And have you guys, I mean, that number that you said, like 50%.
Yeah.
Like increase. So something that was 500,000 is $1 million now.
Yeah, I've one client of mine. The beginning of the year, they bought their place for just over 650 2 years ago, and they decided they wanted to move on, and we ended up getting them over 1.2 million.
80 showings.
80
Wow.
Just insane.
80 showings at a cottage. Wow.
Was that in Constance Bay or where was that located?
Big Rito, yeah.
Big Rito, yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And people can
That place
see,
must
like,
have-
it's public information. They see what they bought it for. And some of the agents are like, well, they've done a lot of improvements. And we're like, no.
Not really.
We're like, all right, well, here's our offer still.
And when people are selling those properties, is it typically kind of like an all-in as is? Like, are they getting the boat, the kind of like everything kind of included, or is it still similar to in the city where you get the bones and that's it?
It's a little it's more common to get most of the furnishings included with a cottage because it is typically somebody's secondary home. We say it's always easier to give us your exclusion list than your inclusion list. So, let us know what you want to bring with you when you leave. And then basically they leave everything else. So it's, family artwork or, we've seen chests, some really weird stuff that people want to take with them, but
Tickle trunk.
the tickle trunk always, it's always that one.
Gotta leave the tickle trunk. That's it's in my conditions for sure. One of the other questions we had from Teresa, she says, thank you for the valuable insight in the Ottawa real estate. I look forward to every episode. Your analysis on waterfront cottages west of Ottawa in general would be much appreciated. Also, best time to purchase a cottage for better price. Is it fall, winter? And what risks of not being able to inspect the well, septic, see the specific waterfront, et cetera? So I guess just generally speaking, like when's kind of the best time from your experience to be looking for a cottage property and what kind of risks are associated with the off season?
Those are really important things to look at for cottages, especially if you've got an older cottage that, might have a really old septic. Getting those conditions looked at, like the well, the septic ahead of time is really important. Often, you might not have the ability to do that, but having an agent that knows that specific lake is really important. And, asking them, making sure that they've sold something on that lake before is going to be key to knowing whether that waterfront's going to be good. And I mean, septics can be replaced, wells can be replaced, but you can never change your waterfront. That's what I tell people all the time. So I'm comfortable looking at Big Rito in the middle of winter because I know all the shoreline, so I can pretty confidently say to somebody, hey, you're not going to like this when this thaws, or you're going to absolutely love this if this is the type of waterfront you're looking for. I mean, I've got to be honest, I'm going to see them on the lake all summer, so I better be right. They're going to be there. So,
to jump in,
Pete, just driving by in their boat.
Hammer the boat and see you later. Yeah.
like there might be less competition from a buyer's standpoint in the winter. But again, if you're getting a screaming deal on something, you have no idea what that waterfront looks like. And we've talked to a lot of people. We go to list their place, like, when we bought it, 6-7 years ago, it was beautiful waterfront. It was like super early spring, no weeds, and all of a sudden they have a massive weed bed that they own instead of the beautiful waterfront they thought they were going to.
The old exposed septic, eh?
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of those happen already this year on some lakes that I know where, they get sold in the spring for a very high price. I just like, they're not going to like that in August.
Yeah.
Greg, we talked about that a few weeks ago, just even in the city. Remember there was an article that you brought up about the woman that bought the home, it might have been David, but she bought a home in the winter, couldn't see the yard. And then when the snow melted, there was basically a land waste in her backyard.
Yeah. There was waste 4 feet deep into the earth. Dumping stuff back there for years. Like, I mean, I don't know how often that would happen, but that's heavy buyer beware, right?
Yeah,
totally. That's super relevant with waterfront. Like it can change dramatically, even like Pete said with water level, like Constance Bay, they had the historic floods in 2017 and then again in 2019, even higher, right? And knowing, where the flood zones are, where the high places are, where the water table sits. And then when you see it in the spring versus where your water level is, like you think you have a ton of beach and then all of a sudden it's, it changes dramatically. So
you have to swim out.
Yeah, exactly.
So is the price, like I'm just a pretty general question here because it makes sense to me. The cottage itself, unless it's spectacular, I imagine the true value is the quality of the waterfront.
Yeah, and there's a couple things that, for sure, and how far back the cottage is from the water as well. How much, like, it's more important how much frontage you have, not really how much depth you have, right? If you only have 50 feet of frontage and you go back 1,000 feet, well, nobody's going to care about that. But if you have 400 feet of frontage and you only go back 200 feet, that's going to be a much more desirable lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's definitely the one thing you can't change. And on top of that, if you're looking at like a 3-season cottage, maybe something you're going to live in for a year or two before you have your big plans of renovating into that dream retirement home, look at the size of your current foundation. Maybe that has a factor too, right? There's a lot of that are grandfathered. There's some boat houses. You'll never build a new boathouse these days because of the regulation. But if you have one grandfathered, then you can spruce it up a little. And there you go. It's grandfathered in.
Yeah, and the construction of the cottage as well. If you want to turn it into a year-round home, a lot of the cottages built in the 50s and 60s were built with 2x4 construction. So you can't really get that adequate insulation in there. Some of them were built by, everything is very particular to each cottage. So you have to, as long as you have somebody out there that knows what they're looking at and the systems that are there, then, that's the best way to protect yourself.
So I want to get into or Greg, did you have a question? You look like you're.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to get into the financing side of things quickly, because I think, we were talking about it before we got on air, but I think there's a very common misconception from people that if they are buying a cottage, the requirement to kind of the barrier to entry is that, the perceived large down payment that you need to get into that. And there are many opportunities where you can actually buy a, what would be deemed a second home. And you can actually buy that for as little as 5% down. So, Stephen, I know I sent you kind of a document earlier today, just kind of outlining the difference between a second home and a vacation property. And I can kind of touch on the differences between the two. So a second home would be something that, depending on the location, you could finance it up to 95% of the value of the home. And these are kind of the guidelines that need to be there. So it has to be basically 4 seasons. So it has to be accessible by road. So all road types are permitted. It can be gravel, paved, what have you. The property must be winterized with a permanent heat source. Water source must be a well, municipal serviced, or cistern. Water must be drinkable. There must be good market appeal in the area with no adverse influences. So you guys were kind of touching on that quickly. At a minimum, the property must have a kitchen, 3-piece bathroom, bedroom, and common area. So you can't have just a shack in the woods and finance it at 95%. But I think that's more just to dissuade people from, like a hunting camp or something like that, where it's just kind of an actual shed. The property must be zoned and used as residential, rural, or seasonal. The foundation must be permanent and installed beyond the frost line. So this includes concrete, block, or preserved wood foundations. And then it can only have one unit. So you can't have like a triplex cottage or anything like that. The second type would be a vacation property. So again, this is specific to the location and the property itself, but these are typically financed up to anywhere from 65 to 80% of the value. So, down payments of 20 to 35%. It says insured only financing is available for purchases of quality vacation properties that may not be accessible year round. So there must be no intent to occupy these properties year round. So this is like a strictly, we go there in the summer. It's kind of our summer getaway. So there can't be, it says no permanent heat source is required. So you can't have a wood stove, fireplace stove, or heat blower. Foundation may be floating, so it can be sitting on blocks. Seasonal access is acceptable. Water source need not be potable. However, running water is required. It can be lake water intake. Indoor plumbing can be chemical, portable, or a holding tank. And the property may be accessible only by boat. So, Greg, I know I think a couple of weeks ago, we were recording and you had someone that was living on that island. So that would qualify. You could do that with at, let's just say even 35% down. You can get some really good deals. And I think when people are thinking of this, they might be thinking, well, let's take some of our equity of our primary home and buy an investment property. Well, you can do the same thing, but buy, as you guys are mentioning, kind of that retirement plan / home now, right? And not have to wait.
Yeah, we've actually done 3 island properties already this year.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah, they're a little more laborious.
Yeah. And there's other factors too, right? With the financing, like if it is boat access only, it needs to have a deemed access point to actually get like a land access somewhere.
You need to have where like I mean, luckily, Big Rito, for example, has 3 marinas. So you can have a lease at a marina to take your boat out. But if you want to build something else on the island, you really need to check with the municipalities in the township and the conservation authority to make sure that you have permission from your deemed access to access your property. If that makes sense.
Do you know how many island properties there are on Big Rito?
I should know that. I would say a couple hundred, I would think.
Really? Eh? Wow.
I would think maybe not that many. I should know that.
You should have said like 87.
Probably
and then everyone
20,
would have gone, wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
even if it's 100, that's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, they might not all be island, but boat access only.
Right.
So my family has an island on the lake, both my mom's side and my dad's side. So we're like longtime islanders. I wouldn't have any. I love it.
It might even be considered Vikings, being on the water so often, eh? Just been there for so long, eh? Generations of Pete's family.
Yeah, nobody can come unless they own a boat. If they own a boat, then they're allowed to come. So it's sort of best of both worlds.
That's amazing.
Just a moat beside, just a huge moat.
You have to pass the dragon first, but
And the islands a couple of years ago were almost a bit of a tough sell for some people. They're like, oh, well, what do I do in the winter? And, there's that gray period where you can't snowmobile out to it and, you can't boat out to it. So that was a bit of an issue where now with the jump in prices, all of a sudden people are like, well, that, 500, 600 grand that I was going to spend on a cottage and kind of held off on, now it's not even reasonable. So it's like an island's their option. And we've seen a massive increase in interest in just having boat access property.
One guy I know in Big Rito, he stayed at his island property all winter long, bought himself a hovercraft. So that's how he got it. Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds like magic.
I know, right?
It does sound like magic. And do you do you guys know what the biggest selling area right now is in Ontario for cottages?
In Ontario, I mean, I would think the most popular is still north of Toronto in that Muskoka area, Haliburton,
Kawartha Lakes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any inventory anywhere, to be honest. I don't think that you're going to find. I think that anything that comes up that's road access right now and anywhere in Ontario is still flying on the market.
Yeah.
We're very lucky, especially like between Ottawa and Toronto. There's so many opportunities within an hour and a half to have like a beautiful getaway. Most places I feel like you got to drive a fair amount of time, but I mean, Ottawa, you can hop on the highway Friday at 4 and be at your cottage by 5. And it's a great, we're in a great location as far as proximity to everything else. Do you guys see a large amount of American clients that are coming over the border to buy in Ontario? Is that something that you've seen in the past?
We did, yeah. There were a ton. I mean, obviously not in the last 2 years, but yeah, a lot of our good friends on Big Rito. They're from Pennsylvania, Ohio, Upper State New York, and they've been coming there for generations as well. So it's starting to sort of flow back. I'm wondering what those cottages are going to do if they're not allowed over the border in the next while, but. Yeah, it's pretty popular.
We've done a couple that were just sight unseen too, like a FaceTime tour through the house, and they purchase. If they can't come see it, but they still want to get that waterfront property, then it works that way.
Yeah, that's actually why I was asking. We have a couple friends that have cottages in Thousand Islands, and they were saying that a couple of their neighbors are from the American side, and they've just been, ghost towns because they haven't been able to get across. Unless they rip across the water, with their Canadian flag on the back of the bout, hoping to deceive a few people. But I think that's supposed to be changing soon, is it not? That they'll be able to come across again?
I think so. Well, they hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a little point here. I don't know if you guys, we have a cottage up on the Ottawa River where Wilderness Tours used to be, and it's fractional ownership, right? It's more like there's 10 owners. It's more like a $1 million chalet kind of thing. And, we were having a hell of a time trying to sell fractional ownership. You get 5 weeks a year, right? Couldn't sell it. And then all of a sudden, late, I guess early this year, people just started, they were all for it. We sold out basically. It was like, you couldn't sell fractional ownership for like, well, I don't know. I kind of want my own thing. And then now it's just like, no, here, sold.
It's the same with islands. Like, people are desperate, and it's like, well, if that's my option, then that's my option. We'll take it. We can get it.
We also can't get any rentals right now either, right? So, if you want to get a cottage rental somewhere, you better be looking into 2022 or 2023. Yeah. So, it's fractional ownership is not a bad idea to, ensure that you get some weeks at a cottage and don't have to worry about trying to find a spot to rent. Because we're seeing any inventory that is left over is getting bought up by people that are just turning them into Airbnbs and short-term rentals for sure.
So Greg, for those, let's say there's 10 owners, they basically each have 10%, and as the value goes up, they have that same ownership basically. And how do you decide? You just sell your own shares?
I mean, the value has just kind of stayed the same since it launched.
But if those people, I was just thinking, like to Pete's point, like if they wanted to get that kind of temporarily, just so at least they have something, and then in say a year or two from now, if something does come available, they can like, would they just sell their share basically to someone else?
They can sell it to someone else. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily an increase in value there. But who knows? Maybe it'll jump up 5, maybe it'll stay the same, drop a few. Just depends on what the interest is.
How do you decide
just like the market
have? Like if
you get a summer week fixed, you get a fixed summer week, and then the rest is kind of like a lottery system.
Cool.
You just choose your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they draw.
It's like season tickets.
You get it. We got really lucky this year. We had what did we have? We had February, April, June. We just had June, and now we got 2 weeks in August because there's one of the owners he decided to stay in Florida. He's like, I'm not coming back for the summer, so we got 2 weeks. Nice. And then I got another one in October, and that's great for us. We were there at Christmas last year, which was amazing, but now we'll just do something else. We love it. I mean, and it's right on the river, and we got our own private beach and everything. I mean, yeah, it's pretty awesome. Like you can't, and the thing is, it's like, it sleeps 9. It's, it's not a standard cottage. It's very nice. And we just go in and we bring our food and then we leave.
Right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So Pete and Trevor, if people wanted to, if they want to find out some more information about you guys, or, how to kind of get into that cottage world, what's the easiest way for them to connect with you both?
Through, our Instagram is where we promote a lot of the waterfront stuff. So even the things that are off market, which we see a lot of, our Instagram page. So through Remax Boardwalk or Clark Bastedo team. The Clark Bastedo team has been around for, since the beginning. And now we've sort of transitioned. We've just made Clark Bastedo into sort of our waterfront division. So that's where we're just exclusively putting cottages and the 4-season luxury stuff.
Yeah, I don't think the website's quite up and running yet for the waterfront, but we're working on rolling that out. So that'll be if you want waterfront, it'll be directed that over there.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine that a lot of the stuff you see is just from connections on the lake, right? People are like, oh, Pete, we're thinking about listing next summer or what have you. And just kind of those off-market listings, which is excellent, right? If you're a buyer.
Some people, it's a 3 to 5 year plan. Like they've had me come in like every summer for the last 5 years, and you have a beer with them, and they're like, "Well, what do you think this year?" I'm like, "Well, this." And then,
yeah.
And then and this year everybody's lucked out. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So should we slide into the mood boost, Greg?
Let's do it.
So, gentlemen, at the end of each show, we do basically 3 to 5 mood boosts, little jokes, and try to lift everyone's mood going into the weekend. So I got 3 today. Last week was a disaster, so I'm going to try to bring it back up this week. Number 1, what did one nut say when chasing the other nut?
Oh boy.
I'm a cashew.
Golly.
I'm a cashew.
Oh, golly.
Oh, golly. Number 2, you can't run through a campsite. You can only ran because it's past tense.
Oh.
I didn't get it.
I wasn't very.
We'll go to the next one.
Number 3, and finally, what did the cow say to the calf? It's past your bedtime.
Oh, another one.
That's 2 with the word past in it. Past tense.
True.
Pasture.
Oh, past tense. Oh,
Not bad. Not bad. Yeah.
Oh man.
Up for those ones today.
Well, Ricky said he missed the whole show, but the jokes were fire, so I'll take that. If anyone saw it last week, I basically just fell on my face and scraped myself real good. So, so just a reminder for everyone that tuned in. Thanks again, as always, for your fellowship, for your listening. We air Friday live, typically on Facebook at 10 a.m. right here, and then we release the edited kind of mastered show Tuesday mornings, 10 o'clock on YouTube and all your podcast platforms. And again, our shout out to our sponsor, North Brew Coffee. So it's just northbrew.ca. And if you put in the promo code podcast, you can get 20% off every order of coffee. It's delicious. And, if you order today, shoot us a message and we'll send you a complimentary tow rep mug as well. Just slide it right in there.
I'll drop some off to you guys this week. I'll come by the office. Yeah, I haven't seen you in a while,
Awesome, man.
so it'll be good for a visit.
Thanks a lot for your time, gentlemen, and your insight. That's I think our listeners will get great value out of that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us on,
Thanks for having us, guys. It was awesome.
Appreciate
Great.
it.
And Greg, have a great weekend. I'm actually heading up to Charlotte Lake this afternoon, so I'll be right at your outskirts. Yeah, looking forward to it. Okay, we'll see everyone next week, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right, deuces.
All right.
The Ottawa Real Estate Podcast is brought to you by Referral Mortgages, Blue Panda Realty, and Stephen Hopkins Video. Thanks for tuning in, and please remember to like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe. We'd love to hear from you.